wherever you are, at whatever time of day it is, and however far away you are from here. So you're all very welcome. Just a quick note from me that if you suddenly see me start sneezing violently and disappearing, then the reason is that I'm actually at the moment suffering from COVID, and the violent sneezing seems to take me from time to time. But other than that, we should be fine for today. And I can assure you there's no viruses associated with this presentation or with this seminar.
So how are you feeling with COVID?
Actually, not brilliant. You know, it's that sort of flu-y thing that you feel, and it tends to make you feel quite slightly, well, not just lethargic, but you just lose energy, really, don't you? Like you do with any of these colds.
Yeah, very tired. That's what I get.
Very tired. Yeah. Well, I tested positive yesterday, so hopefully by Friday I should be okay. But I'm fine for this sort of thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, the idea of today is that we're going to explore the trends in culinary education as they will impact and affect your curriculum as we go forward into the future. And I'm joined today, as you can see, by Professor David Foskett and Gary Hunter. David and I work together at the University of West London, but he, as you can see, is the author of most of the textbooks related to catering and hospitality. He is a fellow of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts and chair of the International Hospitality Council. Gary, another fellow of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, deputy executive principal of Capital City College Group, which is more than one of the major colleges in London. And he's also been associated with Westminster Kingsway College all the way, well, not through his academic career. And I'm Peter Jones, I'm the moderator. I'm also an advisor on the EUHOFA board, and like the other two of my colleagues, a fellow of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. So what we're going to do today, and I'll just show you, move on to the next one. We're going to look at some areas for discussion and how they impact on the curriculum. Food and consumer trends, what impact are they likely to have on your curriculum going forward? Observations from the Young Chefs Olympiad, because all three of us were, well, David is the chief judge for that, but all three of us were actually involved in judging the Young Chefs Olympiad, which had over 50 entries from all over the world. So we got some very interesting insights about the way that chefs in particular are being trained in different countries, and also some interesting insights in terms of perhaps the future direction of the curriculum. And then an area of discussion of the importance of people and kitchen management within the curriculum. It's often an area that in some schools in particular may not actually have quite as an important role as it will clearly have to have in the future. So I've switched everybody to mute with the exception of David, Gary and myself. If you wish to speak, obviously you need to unmute yourself. If you could use the question and answer to pose any questions that you'd like to have. And if you would like to make a point and then to contribute, then could you please use the reaction button on the screen to raise your hand. So I also suggest that you change from gallery view to speaker view, and then those who are speaking will come up as large on your screen as opposed to trying to find out who's speaking amongst the other 26 participants. So I'm going to stop sharing now and we'll go back to where we are. And David and Gary, we've all been involved in culinary education for some considerable time. As one of my colleagues the other day suggested, that I think between the three of us, we've probably got over 150 years worth of experience. I'm not sure, I can't remember that far back, but anyway. So what we'd like to start with is this whole business about understanding consumer trends and how those are impacting, the consumer habits are impacting, then what impact will they have on the curriculum? Now, obviously, Gary, you are running one of the largest schools in the UK with chef training and culinary education in general. So perhaps you could just start us off with what do you think some of those key trends are and how they're impacting on what you're thinking about doing in the future.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome everybody to this this session. Really privileged to be here, to be able to talk about this today and to spend some time with everybody here. So for me, when we start to look at our curriculum now, we are very conscious about the trends that are developing in culinary arts, and certainly within restaurants, hotels, pubs, cafes, and such like. And we rely a lot on industry to be able to drive our thoughts and processes on that. So whether that's Carabao, who've just released an excellent piece of work around trends in desserts, or whether it's the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts that are looking around sustainability, they're the sorts of areas that we need to start to consider. So I'm going to give you an example. Is that we have recently redeveloped our level 3 curriculum for patisserie and confectionery. And traditionally at level 3, for as long as I've been a chef, you've always had sugar work, display sugar work involved as a unit. And it's always been sacrosanct. It's always been something that when you redevelop that particular level 3 patisserie qualification, you always have that sugar work in there. But what we've done is that we've been very radical and we've just pulled it out because we don't see it as a necessary skill for pastry chefs to have. But what we do see as a necessary skill is for pastry chefs to understand about putting together desserts that are gluten-free, desserts that are plant-based, because these are the large consumer trends that are starting to influence the market now, and will not become just a trend, but will become commonplace as the marketplace gets bigger and bigger. So it's our intention to sort of focus on where these growths in the market space are, for whatever those reasons may well be. In this case, plant-based is pushed by a healthy lifestyle and actually works very closely with our curriculum process around culinary medicine that we do in a degree level. But at the same time, it's also around sustainability as well, and trying to be economical with finances and economical with the climate and climate change, and being less reliant on meat products. So that's where a lot of our work has now been focused, to be able to teach and equip our students with the degree of skills needed to use new ingredients rather than some of the traditional ingredients such as gelatine that the students would have been used to using in previous times. So that just gives you one example about how we're starting to really develop our curriculum moving forward. And there's various other examples around that as well. But this is a worldwide phenomenon, and it's something that we all need to embrace.
Can I just pick up on that the notion of that new ingredients and the fact that we're often now looking for substitutes for the more traditional ingredients, aren't we? So, for example, we're looking for dairy substitutes, whether it's oat-based milk or a plant-based milk, which, of course, in things like desserts becomes really quite interesting because they don't behave in the same way. So not only have you got to but you've really got to understand how that ingredient's going to behave in terms of the way that it's going to work in certain types of recipes.
Yes, I totally agree. And funny enough, I've been doing some work with another hat because I'm a chocolate ambassador for Carabao, the largest chocolate company in the world, who have just developed and have launched 2 weeks ago the very first plant-based milk chocolate, a couverture milk chocolate. And what they've done is that they've found a root vegetable that's commonly grown in North Africa and southern Spain, which has been used for many years by the Spanish as a substitute for milk, and used that instead of milk products to create this incredibly authentic couverture milk chocolate chocolate.
Wow.
And so we've been, as an ambassador, we've been working closely on adapting the recipes, trying out the recipes, and providing feedback. And it's these developments that we need to use to influence what we teach, how we teach, and to broaden the horizons of the chefs for today and tomorrow.
I think it's about broadening horizons, isn't it? But at the same time, ensuring sustainability and minimizing things like the carbon footprint. David, what's your take on this, looking at it from the author who produced in however many years ago the definitive book on professional cookery?
Well, I think, just to reiterate what Gary has said, I think that the world is changing, and every edition that we put together, there are some significant changes, and we are looking, obviously, in the future with the vegan options, the plant-based, etc., looking at alternative ingredients alongside traditional ingredients as well. Now, when we look at ingredients across the world, there is a great deal that we don't know across the world of the types of ingredients that are available, especially in Asia, Africa. And it's interesting about the milk product from vegetables that Gary was talking about that's been used for centuries. But there are many examples out there that we really don't know about. And we have to obviously find these ingredients. And certainly in food manufacturing, they're always looking for alternative ingredients, for ingredients that are much more stable with regard to shelf life, with regard to factory processes, etc. That's why they've created modified starches, different types of gums have been used, etc. And now they're gradually creeping all these ingredients that's been used in food manufacturing for many, many years, and now gradually creeping into the professional kitchen. You've got companies like MSK, for example, who produce these ingredients, particularly to produce things like a vegan souffle is one of their initiatives that they've come up with in their particular recipe book. So there is this market demand. But having said that, when we look at the subject, and I'm always on about the subject of professional cookery, for example, we have to look at how it's all evolved. We can't just move away rapidly from the traditional skills and the traditional ingredients. What we have to do is look what we have as a foundation and use those skills, how to move forward to literally develop new recipes, if you like, new products that the consumer wants. And interestingly enough, what Gary says about level 3, about it's important to have the vegan, the gluten-free, etc. And taking out the sugar and the chocolate artistry, we can't literally say, well, that's old-fashioned, that's old hat, in that, because that in itself is a craft and artistry, and that can be, for example, moved to level 4, level 5, because there are people who are interested in literally learning about the creativity, the artistry that we have within culinary arts. But I quite agree, at level 3, I was never a great believer in level 3 of actually sugar or advanced chocolate work at level 3. They have to, it's much more important that they understand ingredients at that level. I think when you go on to the more advanced level, then you can bring in the artistry, etc. But I don't think we can lose the artistry, because I think that's what people look at. And when we look at artistry, of course, as I said to my deputy vice chancellor when she was looking at the sugar and the chocolate work, etc. And I said to her, well, if that was in stone or metal, that would be in the Tate model. Yeah, some of the work that the students were doing. But the students at level, but they were doing it at level 5. That was level 5. Because, and also it motivated them very well. But when we come on to level 5 and level 6, there are even more important issues, which is around kitchen management. But perhaps we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll come on to that, and also the importance of the basic skill sets. So what I'm hearing there is that, and we'll move on to skills, not quite yet, but in a minute, is that unless you've got the basic skills of dealing with perhaps traditional ingredients at the moment, you won't have the skill sets to allow you to work with different types of ingredients. The new, if you like, the new ingredient framework, because you won't have the basic skill sets or the degree of understanding about how that ingredient is going to behave when it's put together with other items, when you make up a recipe with it. All of those things are vitally important, aren't they? So we've got to retain all those. In fact, you could argue that the culinary curriculum for the future will actually need to be wider and more embracing, because they're going to need to understand the different types of ingredients that are actually now becoming available. But can I just quickly, and I only want a quick answer from both of you, is what do you think about this whole movement that seems to be taking place about plant-based alternatives to meat? In other words, growing alternative meats. Do you have a view about those? Do you think that's something that we should be focusing on, or do you think it's just another one of those ingredients that we need to be aware of? But I don't.
So are you talking about microproteins?
Yeah, well, no, I'm not. But anything that we grow, that we present, like, you know, even McDonald's have now got a plant-based burger, haven't they? Well, is it a burger? Oh, what is it? It's a plant-based that they put in a patty bun. But, you know, those sorts of things where they are growing things plant-based, but they're pretending they're the equivalent of meat. I just wonder if you have a view about that.
Well, I mean, it's like they call it vegetarian sausages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same sort of thing.
Which is, they use corn and they use various other types of ingredients. Well, I think in the supermarkets, there is there's definitely a market for that. And probably in some restaurants, which I'm sure they could feature on some restaurant menus, because there is more and more of the young population that are looking for plant-based. Do you call it a sausage? Well,
that's really what I'm asking.
And the traditional sausage.
Is it a sausage?
Is it a sausage? Is a plant-based a burger? I think, providing you call it plant-based, is, you know, it's okay. I don't really have a problem with any of that, because as long as it's fulfilling a need and a market. But we have to be aware of all this, because, you know, when people go out to dine in a restaurant as a group, you've always got somebody that's, you know, a vegetarian or a vegan these days, and you have to cater for them.
I just wondered, Gary, from looking at it, perhaps from your point of view, but I have some concerns about the amount of energy and the processing that goes into a plant-based product to turn it into a meat lookalike. What's your take on that?
No, I totally agree. I do worry about the water content that's used to create these products. But I think also what I'm worried about is the synthesizing of natural vegetable or plant-based products into something that resembles and feels like or tastes like meat. And the process that goes through in order to achieve that. For somebody who is such as me, who is very, very into natural products and cooking simply as much as we possibly can, I want to know more about what's gone into these products to turn them from being plant-based into something that looks like, feels like, potentially tastes like meat. So I'm cautious, and I need to learn more about it before I eat it.
Well, Well, I can tell you that when you produce a lot of these products, of course, in order for it to look like meat or taste like meat, but should it taste like meat? I don't think it should.
That's a good question. No, I agree.
Taste like meat. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, do you want it to taste like meat? I think that's where you're going wrong. But I think basically the processes that they use can be quite complex. And of course, don't forget the chemicals. In order to hold these together, they use a lot of phosphates. Phosphates are used to actually reform the plant-based to resemble meat in some way. But I really think this is where we're going wrong. If you're a vegetarian or vegan and you don't eat meat, why do you want it to taste like meat?
Yeah, quite. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I think we came up with a phrase which I thought was quite good, and apt on that. And it's really whatever you're using in the way of an ingredient, in terms of, you know, as a chef or even if you're cooking domestically, keep the ingredients as close to the original as possible. Absolutely. The more you muck them about, the worse the outcome is going to be. And I think that's a sort of mantra that should pervade culinary education, really. Keep the ingredients as close to the original. Use them creatively as creatively and innovatively as you can, but just stick to it. And that seems to apply, I think, as well to things like the slow food movement and this notion that we should be using everything that we can in terms of an ingredient, you know, the old nose to tail thing. But if you're leading with plants, it would be everything from the root to the stem and so on. But those things are important, aren't they, in terms of understanding not only what consumer trends are, but what our responsibilities as educators are to our students, to encourage them to think in these terms rather than here is a recipe, there are the ingredients, you prepare it, that's what it looks like on the plate. They've got to understand something of that sort of philosophical background and the context in which those things are being both grown and then eaten. I mean, we did a piece of research not very long ago. I think David certainly knows the outcome of that. When we went into schools with a whole load of vegetables, lifted up the vegetable and asked them if they knew what it was. And they didn't. You take in a pea to a primary school and a pea in its pod, and they hold up pea pods and say to them, what is it? They don't know. Once you open it and you show them a pea, they say, oh, yeah, we get those in a packet. They're frozen, aren't they? You know, so
it's one of our tests that we do for interviewing our students on our professional chef diploma. So these are students that are released from school, and we put a table together with 30 different fruits and vegetables and herbs on the table and ask them to identify them. And the results that we get are really, really telling in terms of that identification. Even just putting a different coloured carrot other than an orange carrot in front of them can confuse them.
Yeah. Oh no, I can believe it. And I think that's true probably, I have to say, the different parts of the world, especially probably more in Southeast Asia, where fresh ingredients are actually fresh and they happen to be from the market almost directly onto the plate. But there is a different understanding perhaps in different parts of the world. But certainly I would suggest in Europe and America that our degree of understanding of where our food comes from, especially with our students, has actually declined over time. And they just don't know. And I think it's part of our responsibility to ensure that they do understand that. But can I'm conscious that we've only got 30 minutes left. Can I move us on to the whole issue about skills? Because David's already raised that. And the three of us were involved in the Young Chefs Olympiad competition and the judging. And I just wondered, David, from your position as the chief judge, what did you see coming from that? I mean, we observed over 50 young people from literally all over the world, didn't we? From Norway all the way down in South America, Asia, throughout Europe and the Middle East and so on. And we saw different approaches perhaps, but they were all required to do the same thing. So they had basic skills tests, then they had to use certain ingredients and create them to make it, indeed, in this case, a vegetarian dish. But what what did you pick up from that in terms of what was missing in terms of the skills development?
Well, what came across very strongly from a number of judges, what they were observing is there was definitely in many countries a lack of knife skills. And there seems to be a lot less emphasis on knife skills, but which they are absolutely essential when you work in a professional kitchen. Some countries, of course, were exceptionally good, and Westminster produced an excellent, superb video on knife skills of what they had, what each country had to do. Some of them didn't even look at the video. Yeah. But obviously, the professional chefs judging were very surprised at the lack of knife skills. And when you talk to people like Mario Pereira from the Dorchester, for example, he says that a lot of the chefs coming in from agencies don't have the basic skills that he actually requires and wants in his kitchen. What we do see more and more every year is an emphasis, a lot of emphasis on not classical presentation, but new types of presentation, but also the use of more, if I call it foams, dust, you know, they want to be able to do these, if you like, molecular gastronomy, for want another word, without understanding the ingredients and without a real understanding of what the consumer actually wants as well. Many of them can't follow a basic recipe, would you believe? Or if they do follow it, they want to add a little bit extra that they feel is needed, which they think is enhancing the dish, but actually it's having the opposite effect. And we saw that a lot this year as well. I think coming away from the basic, simple, basic skills which are needed. And don't forget, we are looking at students across the globe that are level 2, level 3. And while there are some very good countries, and if you look at Malaysia didn't take part this year, and Hong Kong because of Chinese New Year, but these are colleges which teach very good basic skills, and they are very strong candidates. They're always very strong. Singapore always comes up top as well, in the top 3, because they teach the basic skills, you know. And you know, Scotland always does well. England does well, but some of the African countries, really, I think the tutoring, and it is the mentoring and the tutoring that needs to be improved, if I'm honest, in some of those African countries, and of course some of the European countries. I mean, the worst country of all, dare I say it now, is Russia. I mean, they're absolutely appalling. Yeah.
That might be a reflection of their army as well. But anyway.
But you know, I think that we have to really grasp of getting people to understand the basic skills and understand the subject. This is what I'm always on about: the subject of professional cookery. Where does it start from? Where is the body of knowledge? And from there, you build on. You build on all these additions, you build on all these trends, all these fashions, but you have to have a foundation, a basic. It's rather like, as I keep saying, when you study philosophy, you literally study Plato, Socrates, Bishop Berkeley, Descartes. You move on to modern day philosophers, Michael Young, etc., with their and it's actually how you move on and how the interpretation of philosophy has changed over the years. And it's exactly the same with professional cookery and culinary arts curriculum, how it moves on. how it develops, but where did it start from? That's the key.
Okay. Gary, what were your observations?
So I tend to agree with David on this. I think that those basic skills were lacking, not right across the board, but certainly within certain instances, which then leads to food wastage, especially if we talk about knife skills.
Yeah.
And that's crucial for me. You know, this is absolutely criminal in any stage of our culinary education, in any stage of preparing food for restaurants and hotels, that we should be wasting food. And this is something that we are very, very hot on here at Westminster Kingsway College. We even weigh our own food wastage and root through bags just to see what still can be used, and to learn from that as well. So I think that's a really, really crucial piece. But David's right about those basic lessons before you try to create culinary fireworks on a plate. And we have a lesson around fried eggs at the college, really early on with our first years, and we talk about the fried egg. And a lot of students will look at us and say, well, you know, I can cook a fried egg. It's very, very simple and very, very easy. And I remember the Roux brothers there, one of their tests for interviews into the Roux brothers restaurants was cooking a fried egg for either Michel or Albert Roux. And that was the interview, you know, and they could tell straight away what type of chef you were as to how you cooked that fried egg. And you would either be taken on into the kitchen or kicked out based on the way that you fried that egg. And we talk about the selection of the egg, what type of egg they'll select. We're thinking about the freshness of that egg. We start thinking about where the egg came from. We think about whether it's free range or whether it's from other sustainable sources. We start thinking about the type of egg it may well be. We think then about the source of cooking. So are we using electric, sustainable electricity? Are we using gas? Are we using charcoal? Are we using induction? What type of pan are we going to cook it in? What were the effects of the different pans? Then what type of fat are we going to use? What temperature do we need to then cook it at? What are the different types of temperatures that we should be cooking it at? And that's even before we actually break the egg open and put it into the pan. It's about getting our students to understand all of those processes before they cook and get them to fully engage in everything that they will do to influence the end product. And that's really, so and that's why, you know, taking a fried egg, something as basic and as simple as a fried egg is really, really crucial about trying to understand about the thought process that the chef has to have in order to make the best of their skills, to adapt their skills, and to give the best possible finished product for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point because it comes back to this sort of the understanding of the nature of the raw material that they're dealing with, where it's caused from. It comes about its sourcing, its provenance, its history to some extent, but also the different types that you can get and how they are going to react differently to different types of processes. I did once actually, I used to say it a lot when I was at the university. I said, if I could find somebody who wants to do a PhD in frying eggs, I'm sure we would actually have so much material there, it would be unbelievable. Not just the physics, but also the chemistry, the molecular biology, the whole 9 yards there, that you could create something from something as simple as that, but just to show the degree of complexity that actually is involved in what many people think is a very straightforward process.
Exactly.
I'll just add my observations, if I may. I thought that looking at the way that the individuals behaved was particularly important. And some of that was about their self-confidence, their ability to move around their own kitchen space, that they did it with confidence, they knew where everything was, they were able to, if you like, collect all the materials that they had to have together, and they just exuded that sense of self-confidence. This is my space, I'm the professional in this space, I know how to use it. Whereas some of the others, even though they may have developed a set of basic skills didn't actually have that degree of confidence of knowing how to work appropriately in the space. And to me, that was quite telling. But the other one that I thought was particularly relevant and was this notion of attention to detail, not only minimizing the waste, because we used to look at the waste bucket as well, didn't we, to see what they'd thrown away compared to what they were asked to do, but also the fact that they didn't use everything available to them when they should have done. Now, let me give you the example there. One of the basic skill sets we had that I was judging was their ability for preparing vegetables, wasn't it? And then we had one young man, and it was a very fine dice of onion.
Yes.
And for every single dish, they had to produce 50 grams of the finished product. Now, we must have seen probably less than 50% of the 50 odd entries who didn't weigh it. They didn't weigh the end. They didn't know what 50 grams looked like. And we had one of our contestants in my judging panel that actually took the largest onion he could find and chopped the whole lot. He must have had 250 grams worth in there, not 50. And of course, he didn't have the time to do all the rest of the jobs because he was too busy chopping his 250 grams of onion. And it was that sort of thing that they'd had the instructions lots of, well in advance, but it was not having the right understanding of attention to detail, really, and doing the simple things like if it says for a recipe you need 50 grams, you don't chop 250 grams, do you? You chop 50 grams. And it was those sorts of things I thought that was going wrong a little bit, really, in the way that they just didn't have that really basic understanding, and they didn't take time. And I think that's something we've discussed before, isn't it? That when you start as a chef, you need to take time to develop these sorts of skills. It comes from repetition. You're both an artist, but you're also an athlete. And if you want to improve your performance, it's about marginal gain in terms of your performance each time you do it. And providing you're coached appropriately, then you will do it better and better the more times you attempt it, providing you're pointed in the right direction. So those things are important. But I was generally reasonably comfortable and impressed with hygiene and safe working practices, but minimizing waste was something that they all needed to focus on. And really, it was about this degree of self-confidence. The really good ones had spent time, they were confident. The others, I know it was a competition, but they were only operating in isolation, that they didn't have that degree of confidence. They didn't move as confident individuals in the kitchen. And that comes again through practice and through spending space and time. And we had a discussion during the competition, which suggested, in terms of culinary education, we need to give them the space and the time to develop those and not try and move them on too quickly. Don't start. You can expand on the activity, but don't try and rush them through something. So within a 10-week period, you go from, fantastic phone presentation on the plate when they haven't really got the basics right. Okay, can I move us on? I want to look at importance of the way of the other bits that surround culinary education, if you like, things like working in teams, good communication skills, and to some extent the use of technology in the kitchens as well. So David, you've done a lot over time in terms of kitchen management, and of course the master's programs that you designed were a lot about actually managing the resource and the complexities of managing that resource. Is there an area there you think that the future of culinary education needs to move in more and more in that direction?
Well, as you know, Peter, one of the issues I have is that we teach culinary skills, and we see a lot of culinary skills on television, MasterChef, all these programs that develop skills. But at the end of the day, it's about being able to run a restaurant or a kitchen and a business successfully. Culinary arts is about also running a successful business. And a lot of GMs have said to me, And one GM in particular said to me, I've just interviewed 6 people for a head chef's job, executive head chef's job in my 5-star hotel. And they've all done a cook-off. I can't fault any of the cook-off. But when we ask them about kitchen management, gross profit, net profit, and management, none of them had a clue, not a clue. And so with regard to the YCO, Young Chef Olympiad, that's why I've introduced the kitchen cut, where they have to look at each recipe that they've submitted. They have to look at the nutrition. They have to look at the allergies, very important. And also they have to suggest in dollars a gross profit margin that they have to actually achieve. And I think that's very important as a basis, to be honest with you. But I think when we go on to level 4, 5, and 6 in particular, we are talking about a executive chef in a large establishment, and when they're running their own business, about food and beverage management. It's not just about the culinary skills. It's about the marketing. It's about delivering to what the consumer wants and to be successful in business, to get a return on investment. And certainly before the pandemic, the restaurant business, 90% of new restaurants in London go bust within the first 2 years. And that's because they don't understand the business of hospitality, culinary arts, the business. And that's what we have to get across at a more advanced level. Not so much level 3. We can introduce it, but really have to really develop this at the master's level, and say to the students or the chefs, etc., you are food and beverage managers. Start thinking like a food and beverage manager. Start understanding a profit and loss account. And that's so important. And how to. And another thing is, a lot of these chefs can't lead a team. They're not communicators. We have to get that across as well. And that's so important. And how they use technology. And I'm all for looking, it's very easy today to put recipes on a system to work out the gross profit margin on with technology. The technology should be an aid. It shouldn't be something that that doesn't help us. It is something that is there, an aid to help us in the business. And we shouldn't be frightened of using technology. And we have to instill the confidence in chefs to use technology in and there will be more and more technology used in the future, because GMs will demand it. Hotel groups, restaurant groups will demand it.
I think you made an interesting point early on there as well, that it will pick up on a point that somebody's put into the chat box, that how do we look at influencers from social media, reality shows? Do these have an impact on culinary education and skills? I think you've answered that, because yes, they might, if you were operating in isolation. But of course, what we are talking about is culinary education leading to professional employment in a business. And you've made that particularly clear, that it's those business related areas that are so important, because if it doesn't make a profit, it doesn't exist. It goes out of business. So yes, you've got to perhaps recognize that they may have an influence on food trends, but they shouldn't dominate. What we should be looking at is the totality of culinary education in the context of the business activity. And I think that's important. And I know you do quite a bit, don't you, Gary, at Westminster Kingsway, at looking at how that all fits together.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's about reading the business as well. And becoming a part of that business, so that you start to read the trends of customer bookings. When are they booking? How long are they booking for? Menu engineering. So what are the customers actually going to go for off your menu? How many times a year are you going to change that menu? About costing those menu items, as David has mentioned. There's various mechanisms there now to successfully cost out your individual recipes. I mean, Kitchen Cut is a good example of that, and provide all the nutritional information that sits alongside that too. So there are certain drivers that will come from government in order for us to respond to, around the health and the hygiene. So kitchen hygiene is also another area which chefs need to be very, very motivated on, and not just treat it as something that they think will happen automatically. It doesn't. I know of a chef very, very close to where I live who is a great chef, very, very good chef, and quite the leader, but got 1 star for his hygiene rating, 1 star out of 5.
Whoa!
And he was shocked apparently to receive that, and then said that it didn't really matter anyway, because he was going to get a refurbished kitchen in the next 3 months. So that's still 3 months that his clients have got to sit through a very, very poor and shoddy hygiene rating. I mean, would you go and eat your food there? I'm not so sure that I would.
No, and that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because one of the things about that is that those hygiene ratings aren't just about the physical characteristics of the building. It's actually about the processes you put into place.
Absolutely.
It's the systems that you've got in place.
Yeah.
I find that, because I think there is this other trend, isn't there, which we do know about. The pandemic raised people's awareness of a whole raft of issues about health, security and safety. And those haven't gone away. So we're all very, very aware of what's going on there. And consumers are very aware of it, even to the extent of wanting to not go into a situation where they think they might be overly exposed, especially as far as COVID is concerned. So there's quite a few restaurants around us where they've actually reduced the number of covers quite deliberately. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is that the COVID situation, they want the customers to feel more secure. But the other, of course, is they can't always get the staff they need to be able to service the number of covers they may have had originally. So we've even got restaurants that have actually changed their operational style because they can't get the staff to carry out the operational style that they had before. But at the same time, they're making sure that their customers are very aware of the health and the security issues and the importance that they're placing on them. We have a question.
Sorry, Peter. That's another skill set that the executive needs to have, and that's about leading your team. And upskilling your team as well, and to make sure that you can build your team and those inter-team relationships, and how you influence behaviours between team members, both back and front of house, and how you support the team, not just to meet the business objectives of the business, but for them to develop and maximise their own performance, and really take an interest in that. And I think that generally, especially with SMEs, some of that skill set is severely lacking.
Yeah, and what we've just been talking about really relates to an observation that somebody put into the chat about the factors affecting culinary education in the COVID-19 situation. And I think it's the longer term issues that we're beginning to address now. And some of them are that we haven't got as much staff, we haven't got as many staff coming back into the business as we had before. The other issue as far as staff is concerned is that they have to be much more flexible in terms of working across, so it's more multitasking, but also the employer has got to be much more flexible in terms of understanding the motivation and the needs and wants of the member of staff. So it's about this whole business, isn't it? It's about the whole notion about working in the teams. It's about ensuring that the working conditions are appropriate, the morale is appropriate for them as well. And that comes about from everybody understanding what the dynamics are of working together and the importance of that. And I'm not sure that we've tended, I think education generally, I'm not just talking about culinary education, but we've tended to compartmentalize all these little things. We talk about one thing but when you go into the workplace, they all come into play all at the same time, don't they? Our culinary curriculum, or any curriculum, divides the world up into nice bite-sized chunks that somebody's obviously thought, well, that's a subject in itself. And yet the reality is, when you move people into the workplace, those bite-sized chunks disappear. Some of the underpinning knowledge is there and is important, but the reality is that you operate in a much more complex world. And I'm not so sure that we think through, in terms of our education processes, how you help our students join up the dots in this. How do they work in that complex environment?
Can I come on?
Yeah, please do, David.
Of hygiene, because I think this is one of the biggest issues that we now face, particularly post-COVID, and with the numbers of viruses that are out there, and the contamination effects that we may be faced in the future. I think that when I see, for example, the chefs who are wearing butcher's aprons, for example, the idea of a butcher's apron was actually to differentiate the person that was dealing with raw meat from opposed to cooked meat. But we've seemed to adopt the butcher's apron as a fashion item now. You know, working in a kitchen is not a fashion item. It's protective clothing, which is very important in terms of hygiene. And I think that we've got to have more sanitization than ever before, particularly hand sanitizers, both front and back of house. I think we're going to, if we become complacent, we are going to be in very big trouble in the future. I would not want to dine in any restaurant with a 1-star hygiene.
No,
I would avoid it.
Not.
And I think we've got to be very, very careful in future. If, for example, we look at Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, face masks before COVID, I've observed a number of restaurants and hotels in Hong Kong, particularly in the vocational training center in Hong Kong, where when they're cooking in the kitchen, they're wearing face masks. When they're serving on a buffet, they wear face masks. You don't see that in this country. I think that in many cases, hygiene in this country, we have become too complacent. And I think it's a great danger. And one of the culinary part of culinary education is got to really reinforce the importance of hygiene and food safety.
Yeah, no, I agree with you entirely. And I think that is an issue that, of course, businesses are perhaps not taking it quite so importantly as they were during the pandemic, because as far as the consumers are concerned, the whole thing's over, except we've now got huge rising case numbers. And I'm a case in point. And I hadn't been out socially last week much at all. So, you know, all of a sudden, if you've got rising case numbers, then you've got less customers who are going to be coming into your environment. And you and I have had this conversation before. I would much rather now go into a restaurant that's half empty than one that's nearly full.
Well, because Peter, you're the third person this week that I know that's got COVID.
Yeah. Anyway, right. I think we've come to the end of our time. So what I'm going to do is just ask each of you in turn just a quick, what message would you like to send to all of our participants today in terms of just one thing to think about in terms of the future of their culinary education? And then we'll have to bring it to a close. So Gary, if you'd like to start, what would you be suggesting to our participants that they should be thinking about?
Think about tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, I don't mean literally tomorrow, but I think about where are you going to be in the next 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in the next 10 years' time? And think about how you can start to build your skills block by block in order to achieve that. And be prepared to be flexible in that as well, because we are in a fantastic industry, an ever-changing industry that is constantly flexible and flexing itself to adapt to the needs of the environment and the needs of our customers. And there will be new skill sets that will come up in order to help us to achieve that. And I just want everybody here to be open to continue their learning journey alongside their career journey, so that you can become the best that you possibly can be and be that bastion and leader for the hospitality industry worldwide.
Great, thank you very much. David?
Just to reiterate what Gary said, I think it's important, all that he said. I think what I would say is think about the subject of hospitality, culinary arts as a whole, rather than its integrated parts. Yeah. And when I mean that, I mean the subject of hospitality, how it's evolved over the years, and really understand the past, the present, and the future, and to raise the status of culinary knowledge, because I really feel that outside of our subject area, people that don't understand it really often dismiss it. And there is so much knowledge within our subject area, and we have to celebrate it. We have to really raise the status of what we do, what we teach, and how we continuously learn, and the continuous learning journey that we're all on. And can I say, Peter, what you put together in the email yesterday, I thought was absolutely excellent. And when I read that, I look at it and think, well, this is the basic foundation of developing a T-level qualification.
Don't get me started on those.
It's just as easy as that.
I know, I know.
I think that if you then publish that, what you sent us, to everybody today,
okay, I will do that.
That's a very good basis of how we see things and how we can move forward in the future.
All right, David, that's great. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so to everybody, what I will just quick summary of what will happen now. This session has been recorded, so that will be made available. I need to talk to the people at EUHOFA as to the best way of doing that, but then the video recording will be available to all of those of you that have registered. I'm just wondering, David, who's got that video on knife skills that we used for the YCO?
Gary, it was. I think Gary's got the copyright. I don't know.
Yeah, we can share it.
It's absolutely superb.
Can you share it, Gary? Is it on YouTube or something?
I think it might be, but I can share the actual file with you, Peter.
Could you share the file with me, and then I will make sure that it's available alongside this one, because I think that's important. And I will do exactly as David suggested. I put some notes together ready for this session today, and what I will do is I'll just tidy those up a little bit. They're only bullet point notes, but they may be useful to everybody that's on the session today, so that they can see where we were coming from and in terms of our thinking, and the sorts of things that you might need to have to take into consideration as you go further forward in your own developments. Thank you very much indeed. Particular thanks to Gary and David for their incredible contributions today. So I wish you all every success in the future. Let's hope the world looks a slightly better place in the next few months than it is at the moment. And on the basis of that, given my current COVID status, I think I'm going to go and lie down in a darkened room.
Yeah, but Peter,
right.
I'll ring you later about crumbs. Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, David.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks very much,
everybody. Cheers. Thanks very much. Thank you. Cheers.